A tribute to Charles Pierce, my father, my hero, born October 19th, 1920, died October 10th, 2012, a survivor of 6 years in the Holocaust. I love you, Dad. I will love you forever.
Ladies and gentlemen, our service today honoring the memory of Charles Pierce will be conducted by Rabbi Lisa Bach. Before we begin, please take a moment to make sure your cell phones or any other electronic devices are turned off. Also, take a moment to fill out the white guest cards that you received as you entered the chapel. Those cards will be collected by a Mount Sinai attendant as you exit the chapel and given to the family. Thank you.
Bruchim Habaim, welcome friends. I am Rabbi Lisa Bach, and I want to thank you for being here today, for being here to honor Charles Pierce's life and his memory, and to be here with the family. You'll hear some readings today. You'll hear some poetry. You'll hear some psalms. And what we're doing today is not only honoring his memory, but we're also accompanying him on his journey from his earthly days to his journey that is next. And our Jewish tradition does not instruct us as to exactly what happens next. We don't know. We often have this sense of an old soul, someone who's been here before. So it speaks to us of perhaps this Gilgul HaNefesh, this rolling of the souls, this feeling that we've been here before. We also have a tradition of knowing that even though we don't exactly know what happens after we die, after we leave this earthly bonds, that we do leave a good name. And it's today that we speak of Charles Pierce and the name that he leaves. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a going, a growing, from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage, made stage by stage, from birth to death, until life everlasting. It's at this time I'd like to invite Stacy Pierce to come up and read.
This is a special poem that means a lot to our family and to Dad. I read of a man who spoke to speak at a funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on his tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came her date of her birth and spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that she spent alive on earth and now only who loved her know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real and always try to understand the way other people feel, and be less quick to anger and show appreciation and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before, if we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? Thanks. I love you, Dad.
We are speaking today about how Charles spent his dash. He was born on October 9th, 1920, and passed October 10th, 2012. Source of life, author of all existence, we call upon you as our loving Creator. You summon us into life. You sustain and guide us to the very end. Our lives are often filled with suffering and pain, but your light is not entirely hidden from our eyes. You are indeed our light and our hope. In this hour of parting from our beloved Charles, we cherish the years that were allotted to him. They were a source of blessing for many. I now call on Sherry, his daughter.
On October 3rd, my dad decided to come off dialysis, so we knew he had a very short time left with us. So on October 4th, I banged out a letter on the computer. October 5th, I read it to him, and he was totally coherent. And so I'd like to share that with everybody. A letter to Dad. Dear Dad, most people read eulogies at people's funerals, which I will do someday, but I wanted you to hear how wonderful my life is because of you and Mom. You are and always have been the best dad anyone could ever ask for. You have taught me, quote, how to survive. When you were in your late teens and into your 20s, you suffered like no other for 6 long, horrific years in the concentration camps. You held on and beat those evil creatures, and you turned all of that tragedy into a happy ending. Since then, you have touched so many lives with your story. You are a true American hero and will always be my hero. We will not let your story go away. Your documentary will live on forever and teach the next generation and the next generation to never let this happen again. It will also teach them what true love is and how to turn bad into good. You are a wonderful husband to Mom for 58 plus years and have spoiled her to no end. She now is taking care of you as you struggle to fight, except now you are almost 92. God bless you, Daddy, for trying all these months. You have suffered long enough and need some peace and good health in heaven. We will miss you terribly, but we'll have the best memories any kid, grandkid, friend, ambassador of love, etc. could ever ask for. I can't thank you enough for teaching me, loving me, protecting me, providing for me, and always being on my side. You took us places as kids. The park, ice skating, Radio City, Broadway shows, restaurants, South Bend, and to work with you on Steinway Street, to name a few. I have such fond memories of my childhood. I am so sorry you suffered the last several months. You never should have had to go through this. It has been so awful for you, and all of us feel helpless because we can't make you better. God will make you better. He will rid you of this terrible illness. He will reunite you with all of your loved ones that are already in heaven, and someday he will reunite you with all of us. May you find peace and happiness and good health from now on. I love you with all of my heart and soul. Love, hugs, and kisses. Your baby, Sherry. Thank you. And thank you all for coming.
O God of life, amid the ceaseless tides of change which sweep away the generations, your love remains to comfort us and give us hope. Around us are life and death, decay and renewal, the flowing rhythm that all things obey. Our life is a dance to a song we cannot hear. Its melody courses through us for a little while, then seems to cease. Whence the melody, and whither does it go? In darkness as in light, we turn to you, the source of life, and the answer to all its mysteries. I now invite Emily to come up and read her letter.
I wrote a letter to my dad as well as my sister because I find it easier to write things down before I say them. I didn't come near as precise as Sherry did, but I just want to say a few short things here that I just want to say. I wrote this to my dad. I saw Sherry wrote a letter to you, and I wanted to do the same. I wanted to tell you some of the things before you leave us. And I read this to him while he understood every word. I wanted to tell you, even though I don't say it every time, I love you, and that goes without saying. I also know I don't want you to suffer anymore. And if you leave us sooner than later, I definitely understand and accept it. Heaven will be greeting you with open arms, and you will be pain-free. It's going to be pretty tough around here, but at least we'll have each other to comfort one another. We will also make sure Mom's taken care of, as I for sure don't want you to worry about that. It goes without saying what a great papa you've been. And someday, we'll be sure and tell all the grandkids about you. I'm sorry.
Your book and your documentary will continue to be seen and heard. And I'm sure once it goes nationwide, it will make a difference because it has already.
Skip the gullies if you want.
Okay. When you get to heaven, if there is a way, send a signal of some kind so we know you got there safe.
You can go there.
Here?
No.
Here.
Yeah.
I know you've done your time here on earth and an excellent job, I might add. Now I guess you're needed in heaven to continue to show people how to get along and how to be silly. I know you will be the CEO of the angels and will make their wings expand. Please tell any of our family that we love them. Thomas and I love you.
May the memory of Charles endure among us as a blessing. In your own time, O God, when we too are called to enter eternity, may we leave this life secure in the faith that in your light we shall see light. In life and in death, we cannot go where you are not, and where you are, hope endures. Sustained by this assurance, we invoke your name, Almighty God. I now invite Cousin Harry to come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, family members, and thank all of you who are here today. My name is Harry Price. It was my Uncle Charles who passed away. My father was Uncle Charles's younger brother. and I am one of 3 sons. I am the favorite nephew of Uncle Charles. We are so appreciative to all of you who are here to offer condolences. My wife and daughter are here today because of the loss of my uncle, Charles Pierce, not only to us, to our family, but to the community. And for that reason, I wish to convey our condolences to each of you on the loss of Charles Pierce. Uncle Charles was one of the most positive persons in this world. His life, as many of you already know, demonstrated the triumph of hope over adversity. His sense of hope was a powerful and sustaining life force. It's with a sense of incredulity that we can all retell how Uncle Charles came out of World War II with far less than nothing, suffering the losses of his parents, almost all of his siblings, and his cousins. When I was growing up, though, you would really not know too much about that to talk to him, for he did not dwell on the Holocaust when he was raising his children and extending himself to me and my family. Instead, he would recount to everyone something far more meaningful in his life at that time by saying that I have my wife Libby, have you met my Libby? And my wonderful family. And I have my brother Abe, who's my father, and his wonderful family. So it may sound a little silly at this time, given what's happened the past couple of decades in Uncle Charles's life, because I know in recent times he has focused more on communicating the horrors of the Holocaust to the public. He's been active in speaking to local schools. But when I was growing up, my uncle was the energetic baker. To this day, my wife wishes she married someone who did all the cooking. And I, of course, loved his baking. And Libby was so outgoing, it would be easy for any man to simply be known as Libby's husband, for any child to simply be known as Libby's son or Libby's daughter. But Uncle Charles had a quiet strength about him that I always admired, and a very sweet sense of humor about his positive viewpoint of the comedy of life. So what a role reversal it is now that some of you may know the Pierce family and Uncle Charles and know Libby as Charles's wife. It's actually just still another example of how they complemented each other, their lifelong love affair. Charles had an interesting life story, but he also was very good about learning the life story of those he met. He would want to know what they went through and ask questions. So I witnessed sometimes where instead of talking about himself, he was more of a questioner and able to turn the subject around back to the life story of the person he was talking to. And that's when the conversation would really get going, because my uncle asked great questions, not just about the person and what they were currently up to, but also their hopes and dreams. And of course, you can imagine what would happen. People would come away from that kind of a conversation thinking that Charles was a great conversationalist because he was such a great listener. And because of that, whenever I met people that knew Uncle Charles, they weren't just an acquaintance of Uncle Charles, they were a friend of his. People always appreciated his humility. I heard people speak to Uncle Charles and exclaim, "Wow, you raised 3 children." And he said, "Well, I had some help, of course," because he was always giving credit to my Aunt Libby. He was her #1 fan, always praising her and sometimes gently teasing her. I know how much I always looked forward to our annual vacations. Sherry mentioned South Bend, Indiana, among the places she went, which is where I grew up. And of course, the Pierces, my cousins, grew up in New York City, in Brooklyn. And of course, what a difference the two communities are. But Brooklyn was big, loud, noisy. And I'm sure my city mouse cousins appreciated how quiet and really kind of boring South Bend was. But still, nonetheless, it wasn't the cities that we wanted to see, it was each other we wanted to see when growing up, and that was because of our parents. Our parents were so excited about getting together. You could imagine, in retrospect, how they would save through the year for their big annual vacation to see each other each summer. Whether it was in New York or alternatively in South Bend, it was always fun just being together. But a little later in life, where I really saw Charles and Libby come to life was when we started meeting in a neutral spot, the Catskills. And that's where I saw them really be so vibrant and outgoing, and to me, they were excited. They were living large. They were in a resort with their family, and they were together. Who could have imagined, my uncle once told me that after what they went through, that they would be able to come together, be together in a resort environment, and live it up. My parents' anticipation, I know that of Charles and Libby's anticipation, was comparable to what a young child today, if they were coming from anywhere other than Southern California, might be looking forward to going to Disneyland. It was that kind of a comparison. Because Charles and my father were going to be together. And of course, they were ecstatic together. They were, in their own quiet way, whether it was simply playing cards together or reminiscing or talking about their hopes and dreams, they always made sure to plan for their next vacation together. It was that important to be together. Now, of course, as a parent, we all know Uncle Charles showered his children with love and affection. What did his children want from their father? Well, I think they probably wanted one thing, just as my two brothers and I wanted for our Uncle Charles, and that was to live a long life. And you know what? We got our way. Uncle Charles lived a long life, a productive life, a loving life, and he was loved. We all know what Charles valued in his life, for he would say, my children, my grandchildren, my wife, these are my most precious possessions that are a part of me. And that was Uncle Charles, summarizing his love with such simple elegance. I learned from observing my uncle and my father and their quiet determination, but of course I had still another wish that was not fulfilled. I had a selfish wish. I wish I could have known Charles and Libby when they were younger, when they were in their 20s, when they were young, energetic, vivacious, and full of life. The pictures are terrific, and if you haven't seen too many of the pictures in their younger years, they're just great, and I know you look forward to sharing them with Libby in the future. Here, of course, though, I didn't have a chance to meet them at that age and stage. Nowadays, we and our children live in such comfort in the United States. But as the years passed, I realized it wasn't merely because of where we were born. It wasn't because of our country of birth, necessarily, but because of the sacrifices of our parents. And in turn, I know my cousins share the same attitude. As Charles's health declined, you would not know it to talk to him by telephone. He treated his physical deterioration in the same manner in which he treated the Holocaust. When I would speak to him by phone, he would want to change the subject from his health. In effect, by his conduct, he would say, let's not dwell on it. There are more important things we can talk about. You're here. Tell me a story about you. And that strength to survive, that insight to know others, and to know one other thing about Charles. He was never a demanding person. He was a gentle person. You know, we always say, ladies and gentlemen. When you hear the phrase gentleman, it's Uncle Charles to a T. There are so many stories that could be shared, and as I said at the outset, I'm sorry for your loss in a different way. But I'm sorry that I did not get to know Uncle Charles through your eyes as well as I could have. And for many of you who I haven't met today, I hope to see you throughout the day today and learn more stories about Uncle Charles through your eyes. So please, interrupt me from the food table today if you see me later, and share a story about Uncle Charles with me. I would greatly appreciate that. Sorrow is not what Uncle Charles would want for any of us. I can say that in my mind, I can hear him saying to all of us today, Kanai Nahora, life moves forward. You build your future life with your loved ones, just as we did, my Libby and me.
God, you give us loved ones and make them the strength of our life and the light of our eyes. They depart and leave us bereft on a lonely way, but you are the living fountain from which our healing flows. To you the stricken look for comfort, and the sorrow-laden for consolation. Oh God, we see life as through windows that open on eternity. We see that love endures, and the soul endures, as you, oh God, endure forever. We see that the years are more than grass that withers, more than flowers that fade. They weave a timeless pattern in a world that is the dwelling place of your love and glory. At this time, I'd like to invite Lindsay and Adam to speak for Charles and Libby's grandchildren.
They gave me a stool. I might not look at you all, but many people have memories of their grandfathers telling them stories about how they walked to school uphill both ways, in the snow, maybe even barefoot, but not mine. My grandpa had a different story to tell me, to tell the world. I'm not going to explain what an astonishing person my grandpa was because everyone here already knows that. But what I didn't think of until these past few days was that I never had a chance to thank him. So right now I just want to say thank you, Grandpa. Not just thank you for being a role model and teaching me how to make pancakes, but thank you for making me understand that I'm made with love. I would not have this incredible family fire beneath me to follow my dreams and the understanding of life, and the understanding of life if I wasn't made with love. So Grandpa, thank you for imprinting my heart, and thank you for being made with love. And this is Grandpa made with love. He left us on something he made me once, or our family, and I brought it with me. Sorry.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Wow, it was rough.
Sorry.
I wrote a poem for my grandpa last night, so I thought it'd be easier for me to read that than what she just did. Recently, I learned of a moniker that my grandpa had received. The ambassador of love, my grandfather was named, which fit like a glove. When I was a boy too young to comprehend or understand, I scrawled his surviving numbers just above my left hand. I wanted to be like my grandfather, his history unbeknownst. He was a hero to me already, even though I didn't understand just what he had lost. He was just Grandpa to me, always a gentle man who loved the ocean and was like a catamaran. A two-hulled boat to smooth the rough seas of life, his two-part story, which ends with his lovely wife. For what he had lost, a hero we had gained, a grandfather, a survivor, Charles was his name. A man so tortured by his past, he could still make a joke and have the last laugh, even if it involved passing gas. When reading the letters that Grandpa received from children and adults alike, they would call him hero, for he could put up the ultimate fight. He was just Grandpa to me, and now forever much more, the man who lost in and won the Second World War. When the end drew near and his taste for life grew bitter, his love of his family brought us forever near. This man, my hero, my blood, my history, can never be forgot, and with all my strength it shall not. I shall carry on the story of my family, my kin, for if I didn't, it would seem worthy of sin. Near the end of his life, when death grew close, I said a prayer for him in Hebrew to say adios. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kavod Malhuto, Leolam Vayed. Thank you for everybody.
Psalms show us how to pray. The words of Psalm 90. O God, you have been our refuge in every generation. Before the mountains came into being, before you brought forth the earth and the world, from eternity to eternity, you are God. You return us to dust. You decree, return, you mortals. For in your sight 1,000 years are as yesterday when it has passed, as a watch in the night. You engulf us in sleep. We are like grass that renews itself. At daybreak, it flourishes anew. At dusk, it withers and dries up. The span of our life is 80 years and 10, or, given strength, 80 years. But the best of those years have trouble and sorrow. They pass by speedily, and we are in darkness. Teach us, therefore, so to number our days, that we may attain a heart of wisdom. Turn to us, O God. Show mercy to your servants. Satisfy us at daybreak with your steadfast love, that we may sing for joy all our days. Let your deeds be seen by your servants, your glory by their children. May your favor, O God, be upon us. Establish the work of our hands, that it may long endure. I now invite his son Mark to come and speak.
As you all know, lately my dad's been ill, and we've been in the hospital. And the nurses come up to me when they see me in the room with my dad, and they said, "Boy, you two are like bookends." Well, I'm fortunate that I had my dad for as long as I did, because I assume they meant that this bookend is the same as that bookend over there, and not this handsome picture of my dad here. This picture here, right next to me, is the man that knocked on my mom's door on a blind date, and she just couldn't believe that this was a blind date. And she has a great story, which she can share with all of you later. But not only was he a good. That's okay. I'm okay. Thank you, Adam. Not only was he a good-looking man, but beyond that, he was a wonderful man. And I do have a written story and eulogy that I will read to you, but I just wanted to share those moments. I'd like to start by thanking all of you for being here and all the outpouring support to my family, and especially my mom. Mom and Dad were like one person. They did everything together, except for a few nights that he spent in the hospital and a one-week trip back to Germany that my dad had to go to testify about the horrors he endured during the Holocaust. My folks were never apart. My dad was not only a man who I was proud to say molded me into the man I am today, but he was a role model for all husbands, all fathers, and all educators. I was the luckiest child on the planet. I was born to two devoted, loving, and gracious parents who were both teachers of the heart. I am extremely lucky that my mother is here with us today. Because of our parents, my sisters and I are extremely fortunate children. Was this because we were financially rich? No, far from it. We were enriched by having the parents that we had. But today, I will focus on my father, in many ways, my hero. My dad was born in Poland when automobiles and trucks were still a novelty, and horse and buggy was still the major transportation for most people. His parents walked where they lived in town. They were quite successful. My father's father made shoes that were sold all over Europe. So my father's childhood was also good. He was a happy child with all the dreams and ambitions of childhood. Then at the age of 18, life suddenly changed. World War II began, and the Nazis stormed into his town and into his life with arrogance and power. He spent 6 years in the Nazi concentration camps as a slave laborer. He faced death day and night. My father faced torture day and night. My father endured hunger day and night. At the end of the war, he would be eating grass to stay alive. He weighed only 60 pounds when the Americans freed him and saved his life. My father taught us children to be patriotic. He loved America. I am not saying he never saw its faults or any wrong with the system, but for him, this was the greatest place on earth. In fact, when he arrived with one dime in his pocket, he fell to his knees and kissed the ground. Only a few months ago, he was sharing this story with hundreds of school children and others to remind them to cherish their freedom by not forgetting the Holocaust. My father was among the very last of those who actually lived through the terror and terrible despair of the war years. But I want to share something with you about this. When I was growing up, he never told us children of his war years experience, of his suffering or his fear during those terrible 6 years in his life. In fact, he never let any of us children know about those despairing years until only a few years ago, when he decided to share his story with others. He began going to schools and even writing a book about his life before, during, and after the war. His motive for all people, but especially young people, that would learn about and so never forget man's horrible moments in history. The days of the Holocaust, during which my father's parents, my grandparents, were murdered, as were two of his brothers and countless family, friends, and other relatives amidst the unnecessary death and suffering of literally millions of human beings. But why am I telling you all this? I am telling you all this because my father, after the war, made a conscious choice to spend the rest of his life in love and forgiveness. He taught us children those virtues, and this was my father. A man of kindness and forgiveness, of much compassion, known today as the ambassador of love. This appropriate title was given to him by a dear friend of the family, John Bailey. I had friends of different races and religions when I was growing up, and to this day I do the same. When I was married, my best man was German. My father never made a negative comment, but accepted my friend as my friend without judgment. I married a Polish girl. Back in the war, the Poles were known to be ever as cruel as the Nazis when it came to the Jews. Yet my father took my bride into his heart, and my mom and dad accepted her as their own daughter. And so, yes, my dad, Charles Pierce, was beyond all else a teacher of the heart. He worked hard all of his life. He lived up to his challenges as a man, a husband, and father. And as I say, as a father, he was a great teacher of both heart and of the mind. He taught us to love, to be giving, to be good and gentle people. He didn't preach these attributes, but taught us to live in kindness and in empathy for others by example. Dad fought a hard battle these last 6 months. He is a true survivor. He did everything in his power to beat his illness and stay alive. Unfortunately, at the age of 91, just 9 days short of his 92nd birthday, it was too much for him. Dad suffered for 6 years in his early years of life, but did not need to do that now. It was just too much. We all told him that we were proud of him for how hard he tried, but that it was okay to stop fighting. He died peacefully in his sleep on Wednesday morning. I will miss him, as everyone who knew him will. As I said, he was among the very last of the survivors. We were all so fortunate to have him as long as we did. And so for all of us that loved him, friends and family, I say, we love you, Dad. I will continue to be a teacher of love and tolerance, the very value my dad lived by. I will miss you dearly, Dad, but you know you will always be with us. I hope all of you can live by my dad's values in your own lives. And as my dad always ended his speech to the audiences he spoke to, I love you all, and I salute you.
Esahenai el harim me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai ose shamayim va'aretz. I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul, your going and coming, now and forever. In his sorrow, Job called out, Adonai Natan va'Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mevarach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. I met yesterday with Charles's beautiful, beautiful family. And as his earthly days have ended and his soul journeys on, he leaves Libby, his wife of 58 years, Emily, Mark, and Sherry, their children, Mark's wife, Stacy, their third daughter. Sherry's husband, Dave. Grandchildren, Lindsay, Adam, Tom, and Breezy, Brianna. Charles also leaves behind his brother Abe, nephews Harry, Herb, Sid, and their wives Lori, Patty, and Patty. Charles leaves behind cousins, second and third cousins. Charles and Livy have, in the course of their life together, touched so many. And in recent years, as Mark described, have touched hundreds of teachers and innumerable school children. So much so that many chose to call them Mom and Dad and Grandma and Grandpa. But I wish to share with you a little bit about his early life. Early on, he worked a number of jobs, and throughout his life, he was never unemployed. Indeed, as he landed in Boston in 1949, when he landed in America, he kissed the ground, so grateful that he was finally here, and he said, "I am a free man in a country of freedom." He learned English at night school. He worked. Early on as a busboy, waiter, shoe salesman, baker, later a business owner and a property manager, whatever it took to take care of the family. And it was on Sunday, December 13th in 1953, that Libby and Charles went on their very first date. Indeed, it was a blind date. And Libby does remember that it was a Sunday because she said that Charles had a little bit of an accent, and she thought that Sunday might be a good day to have a short date if you needed to. However, as he walked up, she said, "Oh my goodness, he's gorgeous. Here comes Mr. Adonis." The following weekend, Charles took Libby to his cousin's wedding, already knowing that he would ask Libby to marry him. 3 weeks and one movie later, at a New Year's party, dancing to the song Tenderly, Charles proposed. Libby answered, "We just met. It's too soon for me to answer." The next day, she said yes. They were married 6 months to the day from their first date on June 13th, 1954. In the beginning, their first apartment had sheets for curtains. They didn't have much, but they had each other. Honeymooning at Niagara Falls, they returned soon after to attend a friend's wedding, and so it was that they began their lives together. Emily came along in 1955, and then Mark, and then Sherry. They moved to a larger apartment. It had 2 bedrooms. The apartment was small. The girls shared a room, and Mark got the living room. They had each other, and they had Mom and Dad, and they had, as Mark says, all they needed. Emily, Mark, and Sherry remember Dad being there, ice skating, horseback riding, fishing. Even at times, like in the hospital with rheumatic fever, Charles never left his daughter Emily's side as she fought to regain her health. Later, Charles taught her to drive. Emily's first job at the shoe store was with her dad, and they would have lunch at the deli. Nothing could be more special than lunch at Tony's with Dad. Another memory. After watching her play Fur Elise at a piano recital and curtsying, Charles scooped her up, and with complete abandon and unbounded fatherly pride, he scooped up his 8-year-old daughter, Sherry. Charles also had the cooking down. He was known for his apple pie, his apple cake made with love on it, and pancakes. Toast with a slice of cheese. He loved food. Libby and Charles moved from New York to California in 1985. All it took was to hear that Mark and Stacy were expecting, and it didn't take long before the entire family was together in California. Grandchildren brought even more love, if you can imagine that, into the family. Pancakes, apple pie, and watching The Wizard of Oz were favorite activities. Charles would, a puzzle was always on the dining room table, pinochle, cards. These were the family activities. Charles would play any kind of ball he could with his grandson Thomas. Softball, bowling. Thomas said, "Grandpa taught me to work hard, too." A dedicated husband, father, and grandfather. Charles's love for his family included humor. His dry humor most often consisted of those quick one-liners. I believe and I understand from Mark that it was his granddaughter, Lindsay, and she was the reason that at 85 he began to tell his story. And his son Mark and Libby accompanied Charles on the visit after visit to schools, as you heard Mark say, speaking engagements, sharing his story of survival. And indeed, it was just 2 years ago that radio host and friend John Bailey nicknamed, and named very aptly, Charles, the ambassador of love. And it was just this past Sunday that family and friends gathered to visit Libby and Charles. Charles was blessed with family and friends and with love. Though he is no longer with us, his work and his memory live on. How, you might ask? I ask you, put your hand over your heart. Put your hand over your heart. Here, he lives right here. And here. And here. In your speaking, in your memory, and in your heart. John Bailey very aptly named Charles the ambassador of love, and his ambassadorship here has ended. But his work has not. He lives on in his family, in his work, and all those who knew him and were impacted by him. And so you, today, as you go forward to life and to peace, may each of you also be and take on, in whatever way you can, that ambassadorship of love. In this way, he lives on through you. And we say, Amen. We take a moment for silence. We'll be with our thoughts. I invite you all to stand now for El Malay Rachamim. El Malay Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechinah, Im kedoshim uthorim kezohar harakia mazchirim et nishmat Nehemia ben Tzvi ve'Esther shechalach le'olamo. Ba'al harachamim yastirehu b'seter kenafav le'olamim. V'yitzror b'yitzror hachayim et nishmato. Adonai hu nachalato. V'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo. V'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Charles Pierce, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen.
Goodbye, Dad. I love you. The angels are waiting for you.